Speaking of brain and backbones,
Yes.
I don't think people would understand if I should put on a different hat for this.
Oh dear.
So,
Well, I better go get my pickle halva then.
yes,
If we're going to be
um,
dressing hats for the part.
I don't know if you noticed, but last week there was an election.
Yeah, I kind of heard about that.
It may have slipped your radar. I don't know. It was a little event. Um, and it seems that there's a part of the country that have utterly lost their shit since, and another part that seems to
No,
be
you
waving
don't
flags and making
say.
apple pie. Besides, with this background and study of psychology, I have to bring this up, and you're the most intelligent person I know to bring it up with. I Now I look at all these, and although we had an election, there's a whole lot of whole more to this. I'm looking at all these, and we all seen the videos of liberals losing their mind,
Yes.
and to a staggering degree. Oh, women should not have sex with their men for 4 years. This, that, and the other. We're going to seduce your wife. Weird, out completely insane stuff. Most of the
We're
rest of it.
living in a real life American Lysistrata is what we're living in.
Now, and I will say, I will sit and I will laugh at these videos because they are so far out. I have to, but a little bit like when I saw people 4 years ago sitting out here on the beach alone in the middle of the beach wearing gloves and a mask and sunglasses, or I see them alone in their car with a mask 4 years ago or 3 years still sometimes today.
Uh-huh.
I'm looking at these people who have been so utterly brainwashed by
Uh-huh.
a media system,
Uh-huh.
by information. These are basically things that are not even, they're reacting in most extreme to something that's not even true.
Right.
And I feel sorry for them because they believe what they believe, otherwise they wouldn't lose their mind like this. Uh, Damn, Joseph, what the hell? I've seen propaganda. I mean, Goebbels was good at propaganda. Commercials make you buy more chocolate bars as propaganda to some
Mhm.
degree. You see advertisement in for cigarettes, and fine. This is something else.
Mhm.
This is much deeper. This is
Yes,
it's just an election, but what they have instilled with these people, and this is not a pro-Trump or pro this or that.
I
This
know.
is just the fact that he is the tool of or the object of this propaganda campaign.
Mhm.
This is different. What is this?
Wow. What a
I know there's almost nothing to bite on here.
No, no. This is I'm glad you asked the question because I've been kind of wanting to talk about this. Um I think it's all part of the Trump messianism meme. Um I voted for not the man, but some of his policies. I voted for his party. And as much as I also voted against her and her party, because her party is a Jacobin, revolutionary, radical, neo-Marxist party. Period.
Yes.
That's the people who are running it.
If you
Now, I'm
look at the
not
last
talking about your average Democrat. You know,
no,
that's not what I'm
they're
talking
gone.
about. They're gone.
That was Bill at best.
Now that was Bill, and even he is highly questionable.
Yeah.
They've been trying to disguise the radical nature of that party, in my opinion, ever since Clinton's governors conference back before he ran for president. But in any case, I think this is all a very carefully designed, and this is why I warned people after the election results were clear that we're going to have to watch Trump like a hawk because we're seeing some very good appointments so far, and we're seeing some questionable appointments. You know, for crying out loud, the senator from my home state was just made the Senate Majority Leader,
Oh no, who?
John Thune.
Oh God.
Yeah,
I
you know,
so hope they were gonna pick a normal person. But
well,
anyway.
he's basically a rhino.
He's a swamp creature.
Well, he's kind of a Mitch McConnell clone. You know,
Exactly.
a younger version of. of McConnell.
Oh well.
You know, South Dakota manages to produce these weird Republicans, with the exception of Carl Munt. Uh, Long story there, but one involving McCarthy. But anyway, um, I genuinely think, and I'm in total agreement with Catherine here. There is some segment of this population, and there's a reason why it's concentrated in New England, which has always been a haven for radical secularized Yankeedom, and uh, Nuttyfornia and the coast on all the way on up into Oregon and Washington, um, and of course Chicago.
But yeah,
There's a reason why the nuttiness is concentrated there, and it's not just region. I think it has something to do with actual hard technologies of mind manipulation that are being used in conjunction with the soft technologies that have been used over the decades and perfected by the propaganda media. So I mean it. If people want to detach themselves from the entrainment, you need to turn off your televisions and turn off your talk radio
yeah,
and read.
yeah. And
Um,
look at actual actions. And
yes,
I mean,
look at actual
it takes
action.
work to start. What all we have basically seen is both candidates, well, for the last three elections, really taken out of context. We have
Yes,
seen a far more vicious way of
yes,
discourse. The discourse have no longer anything to do with what policies or with we're both Americans, we can disagree. This has become a for them a painting of the new coming of Hitler, the end of the world, the while I mean it
or conversely, I just received a very disturbing private message on Facebook from someone that was a Trump supporter that sent this to me. And it was a picture of Trump. It was a meme, generated by artificial
of course.
intelligence, but it was a picture of Donald Trump seated on a throne, decked out in all sorts of quasi Napoleonic imperial regalia,
Yeah, I've seen those.
like, and there was this caption to it that, Trump is my leader, blah blah. It was just downright idolatrous.
It is because it's yes, it's great to have somebody, and I hate to put it too, especially for the Democrats that might be listening, but in this particular election, it really have come down to a little bit of common sense governance versus
Yeah.
complete insanity.
Yes.
And still, as a member of the United States military, the damage the Democrats have done to the
Oh,
military, the law enforcement, to morale, to schools,
yes.
to men and women's sport, genetic men and women's sports. Don't be offended. There's still the fact. They have gone so far over the rail of what is socially acceptable or normal and destroyed parts of the infrastructure of this country that is important. So, of course, you sort of have to vote for common sense. And
Right.
this is where you can say a lot of things about Donald Trump, but the policies he put forth are basically common sense. These are policies that Clinton agreed with for the most part.
Yeah.
Clinton deported some 11 million immigrants.
Yeah.
He's agreed with. I mean, these are mainstream. These are main middle of the road policies.
Right.
But we have shifted the parameters so far that now you're painting basic common sense. I see the same thing in Germany with ADF being painted as an extreme right wing.
Oh,
If
it's
you look
nothing
at
of the
the
sort.
nothing, they're basically mainstream
They're
classic
they're
liberal
they're
party.
German patriots who want to have Germany
Yeah.
be Germany.
And they don't even put invading in Poland in their party program.
No, gee, fancy that.
See, I mean, how extreme is this? But I think the way that the media, the world media, have been co-opted
Yeah.
by one mindset of basic cultural Marxism,
Yes.
cultural leftism, and have completely vilified everybody else to the point where people are now. It's like mass psychosis for
It is
some.
a psychosis, and we need to remember that Marxism, if you read the Communist Manifesto, Marx and Engels advocate literally the destruction of every traditional norm.
Yes,
Every,
yes,
every, and every means every.
yes,
And this is why I qualify the modern day Democratic Party as a Jacobin party. It is no longer a political party.
no,
It is now a party with a cultural agenda that they intend to force upon everybody.
yes,
Now that said, I did my news and views last week on the election results, and I did it. It was a kind of extended half an hour long news and views, and I did it on the election results because people have to understand that the election means one thing to us, the electorate, and another thing to the administration coming into power.
yes,
To us, it was a vote for normalcy, culturally, politically, economically, in every way that we
basically,
can
yes,
think of. Shut down the borders, quit this endless imperial project of fighting wars that we have no intention on winning, and so on and so forth. Just stop. And besides, we couldn't win a war against Russia or China right now in a conventional war.
with the woke
It,
and DEI,
with DEI, woke military, and General Thoroughly Modern Millie in charge of it. I'm sorry, that whole Obama experiment has to be kicked out, and I'll use the word purged. Okay,
yes, it
with
started with Obama. The division of the country started with Obama.
well, I
The
think
division of
I
the
think
family has really been pushed now, and that again, Marxism, communism,
well,
division of family, division of everybody.
right. I think yes, Obama certainly gave it a kick. Uh, a kick over the goalpost. But for me, the problem really starts all the way back with George McGovern's candidacy in 1972, because the man was pure and simple a socialist. He was a nice man, but he was a socialist, and the party that he represented became radicalized in a way that has never been able to undo when he took control of the Democratic Party. Um, but the election results to the incoming administration means something different. And Trump himself is in the uneasy position of having to bridge the new populist uh, part of the Republican Party and the old wing, what I'm going to call the Bushes,
Yeah.
because that's the abominable family that really ran it, and I do mean abominable. Um, he's walking a tightrope, so we can already see that game playing it out in some of the appointments he's been making.
Yeah.
Uh, there are I'm very worried about an attempt to involve the United States directly into this mess that we have made in the Middle East. I think we need to hope that he's able to stop this nonsense in the Ukraine and supporting a government even more corrupt than our own, if such were possible.
I believe
So,
they're calling for new elections in Ukraine now.
well, they need to.
Yeah.
They need to,
Talk
and
about it.
and that country needs to get to the negotiating table. And I'm sorry, folks, like it or not, the Crimea is not going to be anything the Russians are going to give up, nor should they, for their own strategic interests. The Donbass that started this whole mess, I don't think it makes any sense to force the Russians to give up that. In other words, I think any attempt to negotiate an end to this on anything other than the terms that Russia has spelled out all along, a neutral Ukraine that is not in NATO and not in the EU, are doomed to failure. And the Ukraine does not need to have anything to fear from Russia, because I don't think the Russians want the headache nor the expense of making the Ukraine a satellite.
The
I'm
Russians
sorry,
have
that's
stated
the
the
reality.
EU is fine,
Yeah, well,
even.
it worked for Austria, and the Ukraine is a much larger country. It has much greater resources. So why wouldn't the Austrian neutrality course work for them? I think it would.
Yeah, I don't see why. I mean, um,
The
and
the
this war has truly been donkey. The lions have been led by donkeys.
Oh, it's just nuts.
Yeah.
You know, the Ukraine had no chance of winning this. Everybody knew that it had no chance of winning this. And the other thing that this war has revealed is the fact that Russia did not disassemble or allow its heavy industry to be disassembled in the aftermath of the collapse of the Soviet Union, like it or not. You know, and I could have told them that.
This is where we, as the Western world, made a fatal mistake in my mind when the Soviet Union collapsed and Russia was broke and everything was falling apart, and they asked to be included and
Yes.
for help.
Yeah.
We should have moved in and helped them.
Right.
Granted, I know how Western help sometimes looks and makes
Well,
things
that's
seem.
the way we did try to help them. We tried to literally loot the country.
Yeah, that was not the kind of help I meant.
Yeah, I
But we
know.
should have taken them in on an equal instead of holding old animosities and surrounding them by more NATO countries,
Right.
because eventually they would get fed up, and here we are.
And here we are. And you know, the thing that the result is that NATO is now an alliance with so many conflicting economic and natural national and cultural interests. It's going to fall apart.
Yeah, NATO seems to be so much more involved in the freedom of speech and so many other things that they have no business being in.
Yeah.
It seems to be this octopus that's sitting on top of the UN,
Yeah.
and again, God bless Trump for putting out his plan for freedom of speech,
Yeah.
because that is the only thing that holds democracies together. But what are we going to do to heal?
Well, that and the Second Amendment, I would
And the
say.
saying, First Amendment, Second Amendment, please, yes, please. But how are we going to heal? And I from having studied psychology, I looked up some of these numbers. It's very interesting that liberals and leftists, and especially leftist women, are on, and I'll put up the graphs when this airs, have far more psychological problems. They
Hmm.
have self-proclaimed psychological problems.
Hmm.
Are on far more medicine,
Hmm.
medications, and have far more issues and problems with reality and anxiety, is the word I was looking for, than the rest of us. I mean, we'll lose an election that we believe is important. We're not going to lose our minds. We're just going to grit it and bear and have a beer and move on to get up, go to work the next day. These people are talking about abandoning their families if they do the
Hmm.
same thing, leaving the country, killing
Hmm.
themselves, stop having sex. This
Hmm.
is complete lunacy.
Hmm.
And I don't know. I would love to say something that would make them feel better, except no one's going to come lock you up. You're going to be fine.
Hmm.
However, they're not going to believe me because I'm apparently a white guy these days, and so that does. How do we fix this? I mean, DEI needs to go away. We need to have the most qualified people hired for any given job. Fine, but how do we fix the mental issues and the divide? Yeah,
I can only answer in this venue in a kind of parable, but I think the meaning is clear. Civilizations get into these situations repeatedly. And when they do, they resemble nothing more than spoiled, rotten children
mm,
that want to continue to argue with the parent,
yeah,
be it mom or dad,
yeah.
and do so by asking question after question after question. But why? But why? Why is it this way? Why is it that way? And at some point, every parent knows what has to happen. They
Correct.
have to step in and say, it is this way because I say so. And you will either do it this way or face punishment,
No dinner for
which
you.
is usually a paddle or, you get the picture. And we're at that state in our society. There are a group of people who are so far gone in insanity that the only way to stop them is to meet them and talk to them in their own hysterical language, like it or not.
That is very true. And this is not just in America, although right now
I know.
the
It's
world is
all over.
enjoying the meltdowns here because,
Well,
but
the
the
other thing that people need to remember is that the people doing this to their respective countries or civilizations are the power elites themselves. And the
yes,
power elites themselves have bought into this globaloney, neo Marxist, Gramscian, Jacobin nonsense as the way forward.
yes,
And what they're encountering are people in their respective civilizations that like their civilization
yes,
and that want to keep their civilization
yes,
and don't want to, they don't want to see their Hindu or Confucian or Muslim or Christian or what have you absorbed into this nothing that is being run by a group of technocrats that have no traditional values, morals, or virtues. That's what people want. And now we're in, this is true all over the globe. You know, golly, the French like being French. Who would have thought,
I know. And
you
apparently
know,
the Argentinians now like to
or the
be Argentinian.
Argentinians, they like being Argentinian. It's all over the world. And Mr. Globaloney doesn't want to give up power and wants to continue. And the fact of the matter is, we can elect all we want to, but the fact of the matter is, at some point, we're going to have to be the parent and say it's this way because we say so. And
and
if you don't like it, here's our version of a timeout for you.
and that's not just between people. That is actually now between for the UN. Somebody, because the UN have caused all this mass influx
Yes,
of people around the world that
yes,
are unintegratable in many
yes.
times. The UN needs to have a timeout. Somebody needs to stop this. And then, okay, now we possibly have a president that might put his foot down and inspire internationally this. Now, have you watched any of Mike Pence's findings? He's the head of the the organization. What is it called? The Organization of Freedom of Speech Online.
No, I
.org.
have not.
What he found was that it was former heads. There's somewhere between Homeland Security, State Department, um, various agencies, and NSA possibly, I seem to remember was one of them, have an upper board of former heads of intelligence, NATO, State Department, that are controlling the internet discourse, basically, internationally and here, like they did for the
Hmm.
Brazilian election, like they're doing for elections in Europe and here.
Hmm.
Basically, whatever they don't want to come out
Hmm.
doesn't trend. What they want to come out trends.
Trends. Hmm.
Like you've seen, the media have been allowed to have a 99% one-sided conversation about the politics here. They do the same thing in Germany. They do the same in
Yes.
England. Now in England, they start locking people up for
Up.
things that are offensive. But the control of the internet basically comes from this American organization. Of course, they're also doing the UN bidding and so on.
Right.
Now, if that goes away with Trump's plan of implementing complete freedom of speech, then all of a sudden we can only that's why you see the UN is pushing for a global control of internet freedom, of a global control of speech online. They want to, if they, like Hillary said, if we don't have total control, then people can just talk about what they want. And
Yeah,
well,
that's
you
the
would want
idea.
that because I want Hillary to have total control over my conversation. Truly, like, and the left seem to have learned nothing here because they're not understanding and looking inside themselves as why they lost. They blame it
Yeah,
on talk on streaming, on we don't have this guy or that guy online. It's
yeah,
people talking on YouTube or Twitter or what have you, which is insane. There's
yes.
no inflection. But if we so they want to censor it because that's what communists do. They want to censor and control.
Well,
So we
the problem, as you know, with the left has always been it does not live in reality.
yeah,
There, a friend of mine put it to me this way once: how much progress is enough? If you're a progressive, how much progress is enough? Well, the answer is never, because it's all that progressivism that keeps you in power. It's always the promise of the carrot around the corner, which you never arrive at.
It's true. Well, the
What's
Cultural Revolution
right?
revolves; it doesn't stop.
It doesn't stop. But the problem now is they've hitched their wagon to a horse that people are just plain old fashioned seeing through. And the other problem is no matter how much unreality they might try to spin through all of their organs at TASS or Pravda or the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, all of them in the same boat as far as I'm concerned. You cannot spin reality so long and so far that it takes over and becomes the reality that people live in. Once that starts to happen, it starts to collapse. There's always going to be somebody out there with a typewriter willing to peck out samizdat versions of Solzhenitsyn's books and
Mm.
circulate them. And more than anything else, those are the people that bring down these totalitarian systems.
Yes.
And you know that those systems are in trouble when they start trying to round up people and put them in prison, or like the Nazis were doing, hanging them off of lampposts in Berlin because they were having treasonous thoughts or saying the wrong thing. That's when a regime is close to collapse, not close to strength. So, as far as I'm concerned, let the left keep talking the way they're talking and not face responsibility for their actions, because the only thing that's going to happen is what we've already seen happen. We've seen people like Tulsi Gabbard, Bobby Kennedy Jr. leaving the Democratic Party, not because he's left the Democratic Party, but like he says, it left me.
Yeah.
And so, okay, he's making common cause with Trump. Tulsi Gabbard's making common cause with Trump. It's not because the Republican Party all of a sudden became popular. I mean, they haven't got two testicles in the same sack in their whole congressional delegation. So, it's not all of a sudden like they changed their spots either. It's just this is a lot better than that. Uh,
True.
so expect if the left continues to go down this line, the Democratic Party, as we know it, is going to wither and die. They may try and seize the levers of total control, and they may be successful for a couple generations, but they will wither and die. They may cause untold human suffering and more misery and kill people, but they will wither and die.
That's what they usually do on the
That's
left.
what they usually do.
Political violence is always on the left for the most part.
Yes,
Uh,
yes, yeah, it usually
can,
is.
is it possible to revamp the mindset of the mass media for an honest approach to presenting news, if ever there was such a
To
thing?
do that, I'll tell you where the real rot emanates from, and it emanates from two places. Uh, one of which is the primary source of the rot. The two places are quackademia and
Yes.
the churches. And the churches have been sources of rot for a long time, but only because the the cultural leftists captured the seminaries back at the turn of the last century. So you had a whole generation of clergy that were trained in rejection of whatever confessional orthodoxy of whatever church they were going in to serve.
Their
That's
own traditional values.
right, exactly. But in turn, the seminaries are part of quackademia, and that's where the rot is coming from. And in identity, I with my co-author Gary Lawrence, we both talked about this in our book Rotten to the Common Core, which I urge people to read because
Very
we
good book.
yeah, we lay out the history of this rot for everybody to see. So you are not going to be able to change things culturally in this country until you either reassert control over those quackademic institutions and bring them back to what they're supposed to be, places where you can discuss and argue things in depth and freely, or you set up a parallel system to them and let them rot on the vine and die. And yes, I mean, let the Cambridges, the Oxfords, the Heidelbergs, the Sorbonnes, the Paduas rot and die on the vine if they cannot and will not change back to what they are supposed to be. And that means firing and getting rid of a lot of leftist professors
Yes.
and welcoming back into their fold some genuine traditionalists.
Again, if there's a freedom of speech, almost mandate,
Right.
then the best then open discourse would be open and free discourse,
Open
and
and
the
free.
best ideas would emerge
Right.
theoretically.
Theoretically.
I'm like, if I put a bust of Hitler on my desk, my staff would probably look at me funny.
Yeah,
The
they think
wise,
you're nuts.
well, they know I'm nuts, but not that nuts.
Not that
But
nuts.
if I'm a professor, it's okay for me, Klaus Schwab, to have a bust of Lenin or of Marx
Of
on my
course.
desk, and
Yeah,
that's
of
fine.
course. Yeah, of
They
course.
advocated complete destruction
Yeah.
and have implemented that quietly. And it was through the Frankfurt School that eventually made it over here.
Yep.
It's been such a subtle and quiet subversion of schools and media because for
And
some
the
reason,
arts.
and the arts.
Mhm.
And it's funny because I grew up watching, of course, we all grew up watching TV and sitcoms, and it was all funny. When I go back and look at old sitcoms 20, 30 years ago, they're always making fun of the right.
Yeah.
Even then, there
Even
was
then,
always
yes.
people have been completely indoctrinated their
Yes.
entire life with everything
Yes.
they see or hear,
Yes.
an anti-right perspective.
Yeah.
Comedians, comedies, movies, everything, always anti the establishment, anti-family,
Yeah.
anti everything. And now we're at a point where we're almost at are we at the inflection point where it's going to have to break or give, or is it going to be crazier?
Well, uh, boy, you are pitching fastballs as fast as you can launch them, and
I
I'm
don't
not.
think crazy is going to go away.
No, I
That's
don't think crazy is going to go away.
There's
You
going
know,
to be marginal.
we know from human history that crazy doesn't go away, but
No.
you can achieve certain plateaus where you're at least keeping crazy away for a prolonged enough period of time to make some genuine human progress. I view what this last election in terms of a very large historical axis because I view Trump's win as kind of uh, parallel in some respects to Marcus Aurelius toward the end of the Western Roman Empire.
Hmm. Yeah.
Not that I'm saying that Trump has the moral character of Marcus Aurelius. I think that comparison kind of falls flat on the face. But anyway, but in terms of their practicality and what the effect is on their respective states, Aurelius was kind of the last gasp of the old classical age and the last gasp of high Roman civilization.
Yeah.
And after him, everything was kind of downhill toward the inevitable dissolution. And I think the United States, like it or not, and I hate to say it, I think the United States is in that cycle. I think the bottom line is we are now so divided culturally
Yes.
that I don't think there is any political solution to it. You are staving off the inevitable. The crazy nuts in New York City and Boston and so on are probably going to stay there and they're going to keep getting crazier, barring some miracle of self awareness.
You don't think that they're going to look at 4 years from now and see no one's been rounded up in camps. They
No,
can
I
still
don't.
have their abortions, and there's no
Yeah.
wars, and like we probably kind of expect to happen. You're not gonna. They're not going to look at economic let's say. Let's say 4 years from now we have more money, gasoline prices are low, there's no wars, and everything is fine, and there's no camps of literals. They're not going to look around and go like, "Oh, we were wrong." They're not, are they?
No, they're some of them will. Some of them are honest enough to do that. I mean, Bobby Kennedy showed us
Kennedy
that.
and Tulsi, yes,
Tulsi Gabbard showed us that.
yeah.
But the problem is Robespierre will not stop what he's doing until he's brought to the scaffold and his head is cut off. That's
True.
the bottom line. And
I mean,
unfortunately, those people are, in my opinion, in too many places and positions of power that even if they're thrown out of those positions, they're going to adhere like the fundamentalist cultists that they are to their ideology, and they're going to make another stab at it. And in the
yeah,
meantime, I think we passed the tipping point for a reversal of the overall economic and cultural cycle that we're in. I think we've passed that. So in other words, we can attenuate and damp this downhill cycle like Marcus Aurelius and hold it off or stave it off for a bit longer. But I do think we're on that trajectory. The only place on the planet that I can see that has reversed that tendency managed to do so by a thorough and radical national and cultural self-reappraisal. And guess what that country is? It's Russia.
Russia. I was thinking you were going to say that.
Yeah, it's Russia. They
Reversing.
they are involved in an experiment to become the first postmodernist state, or as some sociologists like to call it, a civilizational state. The United States is not a civilizational state. That's been its problem from the outset. And
That's true.
that's another reason I think this is a failed experiment. The failure is right there in the first paragraph of Alexander Hamilton's first Federalist paper. What does he call the United States? He
Uh,
doesn't call it a constitutional republic. He doesn't call it a democracy. Those words are not even found in that first paragraph. The word that he uses to describe it is empire.
yeah.
And that's a seed that was planted. I'm serious when I tell people I'm an anti-federalist. I view the Philadelphia Convention as a coup d'etat on the part of plutocrats and oligarchs. And the only reason that we have that constitution is because the anti-federalists told them, you stick these amendments into the first 10 amendments and then we'll pass your constitution. But the floundering fathers at Philadelphia had no intention whatsoever of acknowledging those fundamental human rights. I call them the Bill of Afterthoughts for a reason. And they should have been part of the preamble to the Constitution itself
Yeah.
in order to preserve these rights. And then you enumerate them rather than tack them on after the fact. There's a clue to the thinking of an individual is the order in which they ask and answer questions.
Yes.
It's always the case. So, in other words, look at the order of questions implied by the Bill of Rights. They're afterthoughts. And Alexander Hamilton wants to have empire, complete with all the British imperial corruption attached thereto.
Yeah. That doesn't seem to work anymore.
No, it doesn't.
Mm,
We're at the end of a model. Remember what the former German finance minister, Wolfgang Schäuble, said? He said something amazing. Catherine Fitz picked it up right away. And this was when at some conference in China, of the G7 or G20 or whatever, Herr Schäuble said that there is no way forward that is not a reform. Speaking
That's
of the
true.
financial system, but I think he meant something much,
Something
much
bigger.
larger. Yeah, I
Yes.
do.
Because there
So, yeah, there has to be.
you can't regular everyday vote your way
Right,
out of the divide and international situation.
right. You can't.
Um,
This was a cultural election. For most of us voting for either camp, it was a cultural election.
yeah,
It was about something cultural in addition to the economy and open borders and so on. Those are all the symptoms of something more fundamental and cultural in nature. And that's where the divide is, because the people coming into power don't understand that adequately. If they do understand it, I don't think they understand it deeply enough. They think that if they come up with a few political fixes, that that's going to address the problem. No, it won't.
I've
No, it
I've
won't.
seen some indication that that some of them may actually get that this is bigger. Although
Oh, I think some of them do. Yes.
but I agree with you that the very one thing we can at least expect is that we will have at least 4 years of slowing the decline and the spread of insanity.
Right. I
And
agree.
maybe the signal this sends to the rest of the world, German people, British people, I'm looking
Hmm.
at you, Dutch,
Hmm.
French,
Hmm.
Norwegian, I'm looking at you for the rest of the
Hmm.
world. The signal this sends that it can possibly, an election can, if it's not rigged, possibly actually change because there's a will to change
To
back to
change it.
normal.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
now what we do with that is hopefully there's going to be. I would love to see a healing process, but I don't. I we're so far different that I don't know where that healing will come from. But if I look at the Democrat Party, and we can call I prefer to call them the Socialist Democrat Party. If we look at them as an organization, the UN, the EU, we look at these. I see socialist Marxist agendas. I see socialist organizations like see the British Party. You almost see a communist nation in effect.
Hmm.
And if I think historically, I can't think of any communist nation that have ended because of violent revolution. They have all crumbled
They've crumbled.
because of faced with reality of what they're doing is not working.
Right.
So everyone is looking for the Big Bang. And I'm thinking, well, maybe these organizations like the UN, the EU, the Democrat Party will crumble because it is so bleeding obvious to normal people. And I use that term advisedly, unfortunately, that where the path they have taken is wrong. It is wrong to the very core of humanity.
Yes.
They're trying to engineer a new species, for God's
Yeah.
sake.
Yeah. They are.
It doesn't, what they're doing is far, 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 far off the twig. And they will crumble in the face of reality if opposed by reality and informed of reality, of course.
It's amazing to me to look at something that people don't look at adequately enough. But stop and think. Look back at most of the leadership in the world in the past 24 years. Go back to 9/11. How many of these leaders have children and how many don't?
Not a lot.
Not a lot.
Not a lot.
And if they do have children, how often do you get to see them included with their member of the family who is a leader?
Hardly ever.
Hardly ever. Hardly ever.
Even Chelsea's hiding.
Even Chelsea's hiding. Look at Trump. We know who his kids are
Yeah. We
because
also,
he includes them.
and they're pretty well rounded.
We even saw Mrs. Thatcher with her son on
Yeah.
occasion. So look at Angela Merkel. Children? No, doesn't have any. Ursula, or as I like to call her, Medusa von der Leyen. Uh,
I
Children? No, she doesn't have
call
any.
it Varela, but okay.
Emmanuel Macron?
No.
No.
The Dutch? No.
The,
Was the last Dutch?
uh, what was his name?
Stammer?
Rucka or Ruta or something like that in the
Yeah.
Netherlands. Yeah, I don't think he had children. So
Well,
yeah, Stalin had children, but you would never know it because occasionally you find a picture of him and his daughter, but his daughter is being dandled on the lap of all people of Renti Beria. I mean,
yeah, right.
what a wonderful dad you have there, Alexandra. But
And
anyway,
the other one he wouldn't exchange for the Germans.
yeah, and the other one he let the Germans keep. Gee, thanks, Dad. No, it's just to me, it's just this is a symbol of what's wrong because we have a bunch of leaders that really aren't interested in tradition or posterity. They're interested only in their own narcissistic selves, and
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 why else would they promote agendas of a third gender of basically the destruction of the sexuality of children? Well,
oh yeah,
If
exactly.
you know what I mean. If you make them all sterile or infertile,
Tino,
I'm
it's
not
very simple. If you can't get rid of them in the womb, then you sterilize them after. You
yeah.
know,
I
it's
mean,
it, it's
there's an anti procreation.
there's an anti-humanness to all of this. Yes.
And yet, if you look at Africa or the Middle East, they seem to be spitting out children or India, they're spitting out children with nothing to eat and no place to go. So they come here, and what happens when locusts show up? I hate it, but
Well,
they
exactly.
they are
They eat
useless.
everything. Yeah. If you're living in cultures with no tradition of self-denial, of asceticism, basically,
Yeah.
this is where you end up. So yeah, the whole thing is cultural, and it's unraveling. And we may have just had a cultural election, but what I'm trying to get through to people is you haven't seen the last of them.
No, of course not.
You're at the Catherine Fitz said something very interesting. She After the election results, she emailed a bunch of us and she said, now the campaign begins. And
Oh yeah,
that's really true.
we're going to see a massive hate campaign from
Oh
the
yeah.
side of the media to disrupt any of Trump's initiatives
Oh yeah.
that he has been was voted for by majority.
All right.
And I love that Kamala is looking for trying to borrow money for another recount because if we actually do a forensic recount, we find out she has a lot fewer votes than she actually got. So I'm not sure she wants this. Um, which is very interesting when their big high horse was the two things of January 6th and Trump was an election denier. When historically there's around the low 60 the 60,000s top for Obama, for Clinton, for the Democrats in 2016. Then 2020 there's all of a sudden what 15 million more votes that shows up than
And
it
that
has.
just evaporated.
I know it's funny that, and
It
I
was
mean,
kind of funny. Gee, I
and
wonder why that
where were
happened.
all these votes? Yeah, where are they? Who are these people? Maybe we can get to the bottom of this.
It's what happens when the fraud evaporates. That
Exactly.
I
And
mean, come on.
so it's we live in very and I saw a as you know, and I'll tell you this because I'm sure the rest of the world, well, they probably know. All the BLM rioters,
Hmm.
we know who they are.
Yeah.
They can show up with their masks and all their nonsense. You can almost look at this as letting them riot as wargaming.
Yes.
We all know where they are. We know who was there. We know where they went. We know where they came from. That was then broken down by an intelligence analyst with the same with people that went to Kamala events and Antifa events.
Hmm.
And oddly enough, some 6,700 were the same people that traveled to all her events all over the country.
Hmm.
Um, Basically, her entire campaign was astroturfed. It was all fake. Nothing
It
was
was it
real.
was not only astroturf, but it was afterturf with her own Democratic Party's version of the Sturmabteilung. That's
Yeah,
exactly what it is.
exactly.
So, you know.
So when people think that they're almost half of the population voted for this or want this, I don't think you should be so sure.
Oh, I
Um,
don't look there.
but
There, I started to cover fraud in this election, and there was massive amounts of it.
mm,
And, you
Arizona
can
and
go
Nevada,
on my honorable mention tidbits where I was posting story after story of reports of fraud in Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan. So all the usual suspects.
yes,
So the fraud is still there, and of course, in your home state of California, there's massive amounts of fraud.
okay, we still
The
counting.
pro, yeah, well, you're still counting those votes that someone's manufacturing somewhere. Um,
That's why I can't
so,
get my damn mail. They're busy
well,
doing
yeah,
it.
it's okay for the left to indulge in election uh, fraud theories, but not people on the center or the right.
It's
You know,
also
this
okay
is
for the left to
this is
deny elections because
yeah.
they always have, but not for the right.
Yeah, not yeah, we can't do that. So the double standard is there. It's always been there. That's one reason I wrote the Rialto in Richmond. Another reason is that if you think all of this is new in this country, I mean, you haven't seen corruption until you've looked at the administration of Abraham Lincoln and then some of his successors. Oh boy, howdy.
Oh,
You
you put
want
that in the book, did
you
you?
want radical nuts that are committing all sorts of fraud? And
You made,
by the way, rounding up people and throwing them into prison because of what they want to say about Mr. Lincoln's war,
closing newspapers.
closing newspapers, suspending habeas. It's all there, folks.
So the Democrats never changed. The
They
left
well,
always.
that was the radical Republic thugs, but what were they? They were
Well,
a bunch of secularized New England Calvinists. So there we're back to that whole flesh pot of nonsense and manipulation. Ralph Waldo Emerson and his ilk up there. So yeah, I'm color me Confederate, abominable as slavery was. I'm looking at this whole thing, and there's a reason I choose and have chosen since college to live in the South because it's far more aligned to the way I think than that group up there in Boston.
I
Uh,
will just point out that California is almost 40% redder now than it
oh,
ever was.
I noticed that, but listen, California has always been redder
Yeah,
than the nuts in Sacramento want it to be.
yeah.
The problem is in the last election that elected Trump. I don't remember if you remember this. I was watching the California returns. That was the last election that I actually stayed up and tried to watch on TV. I can't stomach television anymore, so
No,
I don't watch any of it. But anyway, I actually stayed up to watch that. And I was emailing my friend Walter Bosley because he's out there in Nutty, California, where you are. He's in San Bernardino County.
oh,
And we're both emailing back and forth with each other, watching the election turns. And we're both kind of aghast at what we're seeing because what we're seeing is the collapse of the Democratic Party in slow motion. And there was a lady in California that was in charge of some polling place, either in or around San Francisco. I don't remember exactly where she was, but that was the area. And she was being interviewed. This was like 2 or 3 in the morning. She was being interviewed by somebody at ABC News. And she was talking about all the voters that were coming in trying to vote that were being turned away because they had already voted.
uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
I'm listening to this lady, and she's just telling it like it is. This is what we've encountered, and we had to turn them away because we already had them down as having voted. And I'm thinking, what is this? So somebody and I'll be honest, I didn't think, no, it was not somebody in the Trump camp doing this. It was somebody that was wanting to make sure that Madam Hillary got her coronation, that managed to send in votes of people that they knew were going to show up at the polling place on the day to vote and probably not vote for her. And I'm thinking, okay, if this is happening in the most blue area of California, and that's another question for people we're going to get back to, how is it that California all of a sudden flipped blue? Well, the only way you flip a state where that produces a Ronald Reagan, or for
Yeah.
that matter, a sane Democrat like Governor Brown, how's the only way that you flip a state like that nuts?
Yeah.
So that you end up with Nancy Pelosi and Mr. Haircut. I don't get it. It
And
never made.
traditionally, only dead Republicans and illegal aliens vote for Democrats.
Yeah, exactly. It's just it doesn't make sense to me. So I think California has been a bastion of fraud for a long time. And if it ever gets cleaned out, it's going to flip back. And even the fact that you had so many counties flip in California in this last election, even with the fraud,
With the fraud.
tells you how fed up people are.
Yeah.
Don't be surprised if you get another recall of Mr. Haircut, is all I'm saying.
Oh, dear Lord. At least we got rid of Gascon.
Now, my question that I said I wanted to get back to is, when did the Republican Party get the color red? Go back. I challenge people. I've been asking this question, and people think I'm nuts. Well, that's not an important. It's a hugely important question. When did the Republican Party get the color associated with the communists? Go back and look at election returns from, let's say, go on YouTube and look at election returns from, let's say, the 1980s. Which party's colored red?
Really? Was it
Why,
that
it's
recent?
the Democrats that were colored red. And oh, which party was colored blue? Why, it was the Republicans that were colored blue. So when did that flip take place? And who did it? And who's responsible for it? And most importantly, why did the Republicans end up with the color associated with the Soviet communist flag or the modern Chinese communist flag? Why do we get stuck with the color red?
I remember hearing the story why, or at least one explanation. But what was the explanation? Because I do not remember. I think we could flip back again, I would think.
Well, I'd be all for it. I don't want to be associated with the color of Karl Marx.
No, I mean, I like red, but I have a red t shirt. Oh, we'll go with that. Also says remember veterans deployed. But anyway.
Well, you see my favorite color, which, by the way, is Prussian blue.
Oh, that is something entirely different. I'll put the hat on again. Hang on. But I mean, Kennedy wouldn't have gotten in if it wasn't for a bit of voter fraud in Chicago, and the mob helped
Of
him.
course,
Same
of
thing in
course.
what we're seeing in Arizona today with the cartels. Where you see a Republican win for Trump and everything down ballot is blue, which is very strange.
Well,
Um,
yeah. This is the other problem I have. I think there's definite fraud involved in some of these Senate races, and for
oh yeah,
that matter, House races. But the bad problem is, if you start reading about the postbellum Reconstruction after the war between the states, election fraud is nothing new in this
no,
country.
no,
Those pardon my French here, those dumbass radical Republican Yankees that infested the administration of Grant and pretty much everybody else after the Civil War. You don't think they gained their seats in those southern states through honest, open, and fair elections? Think again.
if
You
if,
you
if
talk about white voter suppression, and then of course that triggers the reaction of the Jim Crow laws, where you have Southern black voter repression.
of
So
course,
it's just
it's
honestly.
the things the history books often seem to forget to mention.
Mhm.
So I suppose if we can hope for one thing out of this 4 year administration is maybe we'll get to maybe he can pass a voter integrity bill with only people citizen voting one day on the day.
Well,
Uh,
let's hope.
let's hope.
I think the most interesting, if barring whatever shenanigans the Jacobins want to throw it at Mr. Trump and his incoming administration, um, perish the thought. But to me, the most interesting part of this presidential term is not going to be the first 2 years. It's going to be the last two,
Yes.
when he's no longer having to watch the politics for Congress' sake. That's where I think it could get really interesting. And by the way, the last time he came into power, he signed a blizzard of executive orders.
Yeah.
I think what we're going to see out of him is like a full salvo of the battle line of the high seas fleet this time
Oh,
around.
I'm kind of looking forward to it. It's going to be
Oh well,
interesting.
yeah, full salvos from the Kaiserliche Marine is going to be kind of interesting to watch, but um, I think this one is going to be very hard for people to keep up with. because of the sheer volume of it.
Yes.
Um, I don't think, I mean, we're already seeing little signs of deliciously genuine hysteria on the part of certain bureaucrats in the swamp. And there is a part of this that I'm just reveling in because the hysteria is real and I
Well,
love every minute of it.
well, the problem is they broke the law a
You
lot.
think? Really?
I think I seem to
Say
believe.
it isn't so.
I know. I'm sorry. Hey, let me just put on the head again.
Yeah, put on
Um,
your hat. Gee whiz.
and for this to be fixed, bureaucrats and politicians who have broken the law to the point where they have done things akin to fifth column activity or treason,
Yeah,
they need to go to jail. They need to go to jail. That is the only way to stop this moving forward. The false prosecutions, the opening the border. Who decided to let this country be invaded by 10 to 15 million illegal immigrants? Someone made this decision and signed off on it. That person needs to go to prison. And so on and so forth. This is the only way if we start holding bureaucrats accountable. I'll say the same thing for the rest of the world. They need to be. They need to be
yeah,
set as an example.
yeah.
And I'm thinking the women who were raped by illegal immigrants,
Oh boy.
why are they not allowed to sue the politicians who enabled that immigrant to be here? What
Yeah.
about the 320,000 missing children that I actually have some indication of how they're doing this? I'll tell you about that later because well, we both talked about that story, and I'm interviewing the person tomorrow that was involved in that. I'll tell you how that went, and then I'll try to figure out
Interesting.
what we do about it. But there are so many things that are obviously crimes. Who
Yeah.
hands children over to known child molesters? Why do these people need to go to prison?
Yeah, I agree.
This again and again and again, and I keep thinking, was it Milley that called the Chinese and said, "Don't worry, I'll warn you if Trump does anything"?
Yep.
I'm sorry, isn't that treason?
Yeah.
At the very on one level, there are so many things they keep doing. I know the media is going to have a field day with that, but they
The
broke the law.
the biggest problem that this country faces from the breakdown of its institutions is
Yeah,
is the nasty question implied by what everyone has been asking: who is really in charge here? It's
yeah.
not Biden Joe,
It's not Kamala either.
and it's not Kamala. Thank goodness.
Oh Lord, praise the Lord for that. Yes,
Yeah, praise the Lord for that.
all of
But the problem is, as far as the other major powers in the world, if you're sitting in Berlin or Beijing or Paris, or Moscow, who in the name of sense do you really talk to over here if you've got important issues you want to discuss?
it. Blinken.
Blinken, Blanken, Blunken, as I like to call him. I conjugate the name out. But who? Lloyd Austin? Who's on this Politburo that we don't know that's running this country?
Yeah.
And ultimately, if you're talking to Mr. Xi or Mr. Putin, who has the nuclear football and who's really running it? And
Yeah.
that's the problem. And that's not a good place for anybody in
It's
the
really not.
world to be in.
It's astonishing how quickly everybody started taking meetings with Trump immediately.
Oh yeah,
Usually takes a little while.
it takes
Starmer
a
was
little
there
while.
Monday.
Oh no,
I don't know what exactly Starmer he thinks he can accomplish because I really don't think Trump's a big fan of his after what he almost tried to pull. Uh,
uh-huh.
they're all there kissing. They're lining up. It's as if he never left.
Yeah.
At
Yeah,
least not
that's
in a
that's another big one. Quite frankly, that as if he never left. That I have to wonder. I
did he
really
really?
do, because whatever we've been through in the last 4 years, it was not only insane; it was kabuki theater.
It really was. And
Um,
we
uh,
talked about that. We talked about the nuclear football, didn't we?
we
Didn't
talked about the nuclear football because no sooner had Trump lost the last election than Nancy Pelosi is out there talking about having a committee to take over the nuclear football because we don't want Mr. Trump to start a nuclear war.
Yeah,
Really? Or are you really afraid of the senile twit, the grifting criminal twit that you've just surreptitiously put into the White House by off the scale, statistically and mathematically impossible voting fraud?
yeah.
Do you want to turn the football over to him? I'm sorry, not me. Thank you very much. So
And
yeah, there's been something going on here that none of us have
then
a
you can
clue.
say, can't you take half of the, well, 90% of the media? Are they not guilty of in-kind campaign
Oh, of
contribution?
course they are.
Are
Of
they
course
not
they are.
influence election influence peddling?
Of course
They're
they
not
are.
honest. 24 hours that edited Kamala's interview. I mean, this can't keep going.
No, it can't. And you can't keep calling half of the population Nazis, fascists, misogynists, racists, rapists, Hitler, clingers, deplorables,
It doesn't work
all
in
of the
party.
stuff that we have been called.
Yeah,
No, I'm sorry, without having some sort of backlash. I'm sorry, it doesn't work. You
Sam,
can't have a country that way.
you mean you can't run a campaign where the only thing you have to say is he's Hitler and I'm not like him. Vote for me.
He's Hitler. I'm not like him. And the significance of time is that time is significant because we all need to be unburdened by what has been. Because I'm from the middle class and I mowed my lawn and I know what it's like. I mean,
And that was a Marx.
really?
The unburden of time. That's a Marx quote.
Yes, of course it is. The whole doctrine of being unburdened by what has been. In other words, free yourself from every traditional institution and social moray that you can think of, and then we'll have utopia. Well, thank you, Kamala.
Now,
Gee,
Mark,
why didn't we think of that before?
I mean, I'm sure she read it while she was working at McDonald's.
Oh, who knows? I can't envision that lady, and I'm using that term very loosely.
Ladies of
Having
the night are still ladies.
well, I didn't want to go there,
What,
but
what?
since you have, I mean, come on. It's just at one and the same time, we have been asked to demonize Crump because of some wild affair that he had with or is alleged to have had
Mm-hmm.
with some porn star. And yet, on the other hand, we're supposed to welcome Kamala Harris, who, as far as I can tell, slept with half the state of California to get to where she is, which is nowhere. Come on.
You remember? I don't know if you saw the last speech on the day before what her husband said at some event.
No, what did he say?
I will quote it verbatim.
Oh
We
dear.
all know Kamala. When she wants something, she lowers her head and goes to work. And we're all like, yeah, well, that's what we hear. I'm like, what are you thinking,
Oh
dude? You're talking about your wife, you dumbass.
no! I did not.
Well, yeah, that's what Willie Brown said too. Uh, and you wonder why she didn't win Democrats? Come on. We didn't win because we're misogynist or because she's a colored woman. She didn't win because she's a moron. With all respect to morons, of course.
Well, listen. I mean, I never thought I'd live to see the day where we had an election that was such. I mean, this is like a Shakespeare comedy. This is like
It's
as I mean, it's like we're watching Falstaff here. Uh, it's just,
Shakespeare comedy, yes.
yeah, well, it is.
I
It's like a
know.
Mozart opera where everyone is in disguise and they're all double crossing each other. And you're listening to this wonderful music, and then everybody takes off the mask and the opera ends. It's just,
Except Joe, he's standing with the back to the camera.
well,
Where am I?
oh God. I mean, could you know, here's the problem. We have just witnessed the worst presidency in history, and that's saying something because
Yes.
he had a lot of competition. Think of Ulysses Grant. Okay. um just Woodrow Wilson. you know this man managed in 4 short years of grifting, hair smelling incompetence to screw up one of the most powerful and largest countries on the planet in a mere 4 years.
Yes.
And to top it off, we got rid of him to run somebody worse.
I know.
That makes me want to rush right out and register Democrat right now for all of the ills of the Republican Party, and there are quite a few. I,
I mean, it
I,
took
I'm
FDR like 3 terms to screw up this bad almost.
it. Yes, exactly. It took Franklin Delano Commeyvelt 3 whole terms to screw the country up,
And he got us into World War II.
and
Thank
he
you.
got us into World War II. Yes, way to go, Franklin.
I mean, if Biden and Co had 4 more years, that would have happened.
Well, listen, we're not out of the woods yet. He's still president, unfortunately.
Yes, but he tends to forget about it.
Well,
It's
this,
only
yeah,
because Jill reminds him.
yeah. Here, have another ice cream cone, Mr. President. Don't put that close to that red button. Just ignore that. That's not important. But just, I never thought I'd see the like. I
Well,
mean,
he'll be.
my parents were Democrats. And if they had been alive to see, I can guarantee, I can hear my father now, and it would not be language that we could repeat. I am. I mean, he had even before he became president. My father had the measure of Lyndon Johnson bullseye. I can't imagine what he would be saying, or my mother for that matter, if they saw this circus. I can't imagine what they would be thinking.
Well, let's not forget Trump was a Democrat until
Well,
some.
Trump, yeah, most of the Republican leadership used to be Democrats. What's up with this
Reagan
picture?
used to be a Democrat.
Reagan used to be a Democrat.
And I swear, if Kennedy was born today, JFK, he would
Oh,
be a
he'd be a
Republican.
Republican. No chance
So
would he be anywhere close to the Democrats. So I'm with you. I don't know what's going on here. But
it will
anyway,
be.
listen, I've got to run and get myself some food too, and I know that I wanted to discuss some things off camera with
I
you.
will. I will click us off for just. Well, while we're still one thing, I would love. Besides, I'll shoot out an email to you, me, and Igor, and see if we can't get him back on. He is not done.
No.
He is not done answering questions.
Oh, jeez. Where on earth did you get that?
It's a general's hat from one of the movies we did. Just
Yeah, it
around.
is a general's hat. That's
Yeah,
gold
yeah, yeah.
braid. Well, interesting.
Don't worry, I have others to we can think musical hats.
Listen, you still have to see the little thing I've been promising to show you, but you have to come here
You know,
because you are not going to believe what I have sitting in my living
I will come visit you at your secret bunker underground at one point,
room.
and we talk about.
Hello, yeah, you have reached the Führer bunker. The Führer is busy right now. He cannot come to the phone. So please leave us your name, message, and phone number, and we will get back to you.
And for next year, when we get because we will probably be getting to next year, we should talk to. It'll be interesting to have Catherine come on when we talk about 9/11 and the economic history of that.
Oh boy.
But you can
Um
throw that by her by next year.
yeah.
Anyway,
So they were able, the SS only was able to maintain secrecy even of large projects.
He discovered that there was this whole nest of anti-gravity research in the United States that no one wanted to talk about.
My name is Tino Struckmann. I run Lost Battlefields. Every year, I travel around the world to try to bring you to all the most interesting historical military locations from modern wars and the World War II special projects, battlefields, forts, fortresses, and tunnels, everything else. Things you may not be able to see or go to yourselves. Please join me on Patreon or join Lost Battlefields through the website so you get access to all my files and my notes. It really does help, and like, follow, share here on the channel if you can. That helps too.